I remember the exact sound the house made that night. The way the floorboards settled after 40 years of holding our weight. The hum of the refrigerator Mary bought in 1987, still running. The clock in the hallway, her clock, ticking like it always had. It was 9:47 p.m. I was getting ready for bed. My joints were aching the way they do now, reminding me that 72 years is a long time to carry a body around. I'd taken my blood pressure medication, brushed my teeth, put on the same flannel pajamas I've worn for a decade. I thought the family was coming over tomorrow. Daniel said we needed to talk about some paperwork. I figured it was taxes, maybe insurance, the kinds of things sons help their aging fathers with. I didn't know that tomorrow had been moved to tonight. I was sitting on the edge of the bed when I felt it, a tiny hand on my shoulder, small fingers trembling against the flannel, shaking me gently. My grandson, 8 years old, Benjamin. We call him Benji. He was supposed to be asleep at home, 2 miles away, but here he was, in my bedroom, his small chest rising and falling too fast, eyes wide in the dim lamplight, trembling. He whispered, barely loud enough for me to hear, "Grandpa, Grandpa, wake up." I looked into his eyes, and I saw something I'd seen 1,000 times before, in 1,000 different courtrooms. Fear, real fear. Not the fear of a child who had a nightmare. The fear of a child who heard something he wasn't supposed to hear.
His voice cracked as he said it. "Grandpa, tonight they take everything." The clock stopped. Everything stopped. Just his breathing and mine. He started crying softly. He told me his mother said I didn't need this house anymore, that I was getting confused. His father said I wouldn't understand the papers anyway. And then, his voice breaking completely, he said they told him I'd be gone by morning. I pulled him close. I felt his little heart pounding against my chest. And I realized something that made my blood run cold. The real danger wasn't losing my home. It was losing my son forever. Because if he was capable of this, if he'd already crossed this line, then the boy I raised was already gone. If you've ever felt betrayed by the people you raised, the people you trusted, the people you gave everything to, stay with me, because what happened next wasn't revenge. It was survival. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about family, betrayal, and the quiet strength it takes to protect what matters, subscribe, because I'm not done talking yet.
My name is Thomas Whitman. I'm 72 years old. I live in the same house my late wife Mary and I bought in 1984, 2 years after we were married. 3 bedrooms, a garden out back that she planted with her own hands, roses, tomatoes, lavender. She used to joke that the house smelled like her grandmother's kitchen. She died 6 years ago, cancer, fast and cruel. I've lived here alone ever since. Well, not entirely alone. My son Daniel used to visit every Sunday. We'd sit on the porch, drink coffee, talk about his week, his son, his life. He was a good kid, gentle, thoughtful, the kind of boy who cried when we had to put our dog to sleep when he was 12. But people change. Or maybe they just reveal who they always were under pressure. Daniel married Rachel 8 years ago. I'll be honest, I had reservations. Not because she wasn't smart or beautiful, she was both. But there was something calculated about her. The way she smiled at me during the wedding rehearsal, the way she asked about the house, about my retirement accounts, about family planning. Mary noticed it too. She whispered to me at the reception, "She's keeping score, Tom. Watch her." I didn't listen. Rachel came from nothing. That's not a crime. I came from nothing too. But where I worked my way up through law school on scholarships and night shifts, Rachel wanted shortcuts. She wanted the life she saw in magazines. Designer bags, luxury vacations, a house with a view. Daniel's salary as a middle management accountant wasn't enough. So she started looking at what Daniel would inherit. It started small. About 2 years ago, she'd say things like, "Tom, have you thought about downsizing? This house is too big for you." Or, "You should let Daniel manage your accounts. It's too much stress for you." Or, "Have you updated your will recently? We should make sure everything's in order." I dismissed it. I thought she was being practical, maybe even caring. Then the phone calls started. My bank called me twice about unusual account inquiries. Someone had tried to access my online banking. The IP address was traced to Daniel's home. I thought it was a mistake, a glitch. I was a prosecutor for 35 years. I specialized in elder fraud, financial abuse. I put away predators who targeted seniors, who forged documents, who manipulated confused old people into signing away their homes. And I didn't see it happening to me, because the predator had my son's face. 3 months ago, Rachel started talking about early inheritance planning. She said it would save on taxes. She said it would make things easier when I eventually needed care. She used the word eventually like it was a polite threat. Daniel started avoiding me. Our Sunday coffee visits became every other week, then once a month. Then he'd cancel last minute, always with an excuse. "Work's crazy, Dad. Benji's got soccer. Rachel's not feeling well." I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. Until tonight. Until my grandson climbed out of his bedroom window, rode his bike 2 miles in the dark, and knocked on my door at 9:45 p.m. to warn me. I held him. I didn't say anything at first. I just let him cry into my shoulder the way he used to when he was smaller and scraped his knee. Then I asked him what he heard. His voice was soft, halting. He told me he was supposed to be asleep, but he heard them arguing in the kitchen. His mother's voice was loud. She said I was getting in the way. His father said, "He's my father." And his mother said, "He's a house worth $1 million, Daniel. He's not using it. We need it." Benji's voice cracked as he continued. His father said I wouldn't understand the paperwork, that I was getting confused, that it would be easier if I just signed. His mother said the lawyer was coming tonight at midnight with emergency documents. She said, "By morning, this will be over." I asked him if he understood what that meant. He nodded.
He whispered that they wanted to take the house, the one Grandma planted the garden in. Then he said something that broke me. "I don't want them to, Grandpa. This is your house." That's when I realized something. My 8-year-old grandson had more integrity than my 36-year-old son. And if I didn't act tonight, I'd lose both the house and any chance of saving Daniel from what he was becoming. I stood up. I walked to the closet, and I pulled out something I hadn't touched in 6 years. My work briefcase. The leather was cracked at the corners, dusty from years of stillness. When I lifted it down from the top shelf, dust particles caught the lamplight like tiny stars falling. Inside were things I thought I'd never need again. Contact lists, legal pads, a small audio recorder, case files from my last year as a prosecutor, files about exactly this kind of crime. Benji watched me with wide eyes. He asked me what I was doing. I looked at him, and I said something I hadn't said in a long time. I told him I spent 35 years putting people in prison for trying to do exactly what his parents were doing tonight. I said I knew how this worked, and we were going to stop it. I asked him if he could trust me. He nodded, eyes still wet but determined. And that's when the operation began.
Here's what most people don't understand about elder fraud. It's not random. It's not opportunistic. It's planned. The perpetrator studies you. They test boundaries. They isolate you. They create a narrative where you're confused or declining, so that when they finally make their move, no one questions it. Rachel had been doing this for 2 years, and I'd let her. But now I had something she didn't know I had. Time. 3 hours until midnight. Phase 1. Confirmation. I needed to know exactly what they were planning. I logged into my bank account, the real one, with the secure password Rachel didn't have. I checked recent activity. 7 failed login attempts in the last 2 weeks, all from Daniel's home IP address. Someone had been trying to guess my password. I checked my credit report. There were 3 hard inquiries I didn't authorize. Someone had tried to open a line of credit in my name. I checked my property records. There was a recent search of my deed information. Someone had been researching how to transfer property ownership in my county. Everything Benji said was true. But they weren't just planning to steal my house. They were planning to make it look legal. I opened one of my old case files. State versus Carmichael, 2009. A daughter-in-law convinced her husband's father to sign over his home for tax purposes. She had him declared mentally incompetent 3 months later. He died in a state facility. She sold the house. I put her away for 7 years. Rachel was using the exact same playbook. But she made one mistake. She assumed I was too old to see it coming. I made 3 calls. First, my attorney, James Chen. We'd worked together for 20 years before I retired. He picked up on the second ring. Even though it was almost 10:30,
I told him I needed an emergency trust revision tonight, and I needed witness signatures by morning. He asked what was going on. I told him my son was trying to steal my house. There was a long pause on the other end. He said he'd be there in 20 minutes. Second call, my bank. I have a friend there, Margaret, branch manager. We've known each other for 15 years. I woke her up. I told her I needed to set up a honeypot account, $50,000. I needed fraud alerts active, and I needed her to flag any access attempts tonight. She asked if I was being targeted. I told her by my own son. There was another pause. She said she'd set it up in 10 minutes, and then she said something that made my chest tighten. Tom, I'm so sorry. Third call, my oldest friend, Robert Hayes, retired detective. We worked cases together for 30 years. He picked up immediately. His voice was serious. He asked what I needed. I told him I needed him to be nearby tonight. I didn't think things would get physical, but if they did, he cut me off. He said he was already getting dressed. Benji watched me make every call. When I was done, he asked me a question that broke my heart. He asked if his daddy was going to go to jail. I knelt down. I looked him in the eye. I told him I didn't know. I said I hope not, but I wouldn't let them take the house his grandma built. And I wouldn't let them teach him that stealing from family was okay. I paused. Then I said, "You did nothing wrong tonight. You understand me? You did the right thing, the hardest thing." He nodded, tears streaming. I pulled him close. By 11 p.m., everything was in place. James had drafted a new revocable living trust. The house would pass directly to Benji when he turned 25. Daniel was listed as a contingent beneficiary, but only if he completed financial counseling and repaid any debts to the estate. Margaret had created the honeypot account, $50,000. Login credentials were accidentally written on a sticky note I left on my desk. Robert was parked 2 blocks away, waiting. And I had one more thing. I set up a recorder in the living room, hidden behind a photo of Mary. The same photo from our 40th anniversary. Her smile frozen in time, watching over me one more time. If they were going to try to force me to sign documents, I was going to have proof. At 11:47 p.m., headlights appeared in my driveway. 13 minutes early. Rachel was always impatient.
I told Benji to go upstairs, to stay in the guest room, to stay quiet no matter what he heard. He didn't want to go, but he listened. I walked slowly to the door. I put my hand on the knob. I took a deep breath, and I opened it. Rachel stood there in a crisp blazer. Hair perfect, smile wide and fake. Behind her was Daniel. He wouldn't look at me. And behind him was a man I didn't recognize. Thin, expensive suit, briefcase in hand. Rachel's voice was bright. condescending. She said she was so sorry they were there so late that she knew this was sudden, but they'd found a solution to help me simplify everything. She stepped inside without being invited. She introduced the man as Mr. Voss, an estate attorney. She said he'd help them draw up some documents that would make things so much easier for me. Her voice had that syrupy tone people use when they're talking to children or to people they think are senile. I said nothing. I just stepped aside and let them in. Daniel finally looked at me. His eyes were red. He looked exhausted. He said quietly, "Dad, we just want to help." That's what predators always say. We're helping.
They moved into the living room. Mr. Voss sat down and opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. He spread papers on the coffee table. He explained that he understood my family had concerns about long-term planning. What they'd prepared was a simplified property trust. It would transfer ownership of my home into a family LLC, which Daniel would manage. He said this would protect the property from estate taxes and ensure. I interrupted him. I asked who hired him. He blinked. He said he was retained by Mrs. Jenkins. I corrected him. I said her name was Mrs. Whitman. She took my son's name. And I didn't hire him. So anything he'd prepared was void. Rachel's smile tightened, the corners cracking like porcelain under pressure. She laughed, but it was forced. She said they were trying to help me, that I didn't need a lawyer, that we were family. I asked then why there was a stranger in my living room at midnight. Silence. I walked to the desk. Slowly. My knees ached, but I didn't let it show. I picked up a folder, the one I'd prepared, and I set it on the coffee table in front of them. I said before we talked about signing anything, I'd like them to explain a few things. I opened the folder. First document, bank alert showing 7 failed login attempts to my account, all from Daniel's IP address. Second document, credit report showing 3 unauthorized hard inquiries in my name. Third document, property deed search history. Someone had been researching transfer procedures. Fourth document, a printed statement from the honeypot account I'd created. $50,000, login credentials visible. And I waited. Daniel's face went white. Rachel's expression flickered just for a second, from sweet to cold. Mr. Voss looked at his briefcase like he wanted to crawl inside it. Daniel's voice shook. He said he could explain. I asked if he could. Could he explain why he tried to access my bank account 7 times without permission? Could he explain why someone used my information to run credit checks? Could he explain why he was here at midnight with a lawyer I'd never met, asking me to sign documents I hadn't reviewed? I paused. Then I asked, could he explain why his 8-year-old son rode his bike 2 miles in the dark to warn me? The room went completely silent. Rachel's voice turned sharp. She asked if Benji was here. I said he was upstairs. He heard everything they said in their kitchen tonight. He heard her call me a house worth $1 million. He heard her say I wouldn't understand the paperwork. He heard them plan this. Rachel's mask fell. Pure fury for just a moment before she recovered. Her voice became defensive. She said I was twisting things, that they were trying to help me plan ahead, that I wasn't getting any younger, that I forgot things, that I cut her off. I said I was a prosecutor for 35 years. I specialized in elder fraud. I put away 17 people for doing exactly what she was trying to do right now. And she thought I wouldn't notice? I slid another document across the table. This one was the kill shot. A forensic report from Margaret at the bank. The honeypot account had been accessed 20 minutes ago. From Daniel's laptop. Someone had tried to initiate a transfer. The fraud alert had been triggered, and the bank had already flagged it for investigation.
Daniel stared at the report. His hands were shaking. His voice broke. He said he didn't mean to, that Rachel said they just needed to check if... Rachel hissed at him to shut up. And there it was, the truth. Rachel turned to me, and for the first time, I saw who she really was. Not a daughter-in-law, a predator. Her voice turned cold, measured. She said I was going to regret this, that they could make things very difficult for me, that they could petition for guardianship, that they could tell the court I was declining, that they could... The door opened. Robert stepped into the room. 6'2", retired detective, still built like a linebacker. His voice was calm. He said he'd stop talking if he were her, that threatening a witness in front of a law enforcement officer was a crime. Rachel's face drained of color. And then the final piece. James walked in behind him, my attorney. He was holding a folder. I could almost hear Mary's voice in that moment. That's my Tom. His voice was professional, crisp. He said my new trust had been filed as of 10:47 p.m. tonight. The property at 428 Maple Street passes directly to my grandson, Benjamin Whitman, upon his 25th birthday. Daniel Whitman was listed as a contingent beneficiary only upon completion of court-mandated financial counseling and restitution of any debts owed to the estate. Any attempt to contest this document would result in full forfeiture. He set the folder on the table. The power of attorney previously granted to Daniel Whitman had been revoked. Any documents signed tonight were void. Rachel stood up.
Furious. Mr. Voss was already packing his briefcase, trying to leave. Daniel sat with his head in his hands. I stood up, slowly.
I looked at Rachel. I told her she wasn't welcome in this house anymore. If she contacted me again, I would file a restraining order. If she attempted to access my accounts, I would press charges. If she went near my grandson, I would make sure a judge knew exactly what she tried to do tonight. I turned to Daniel. I said his name softly. There was a long pause. I told him I didn't know if he was a victim or an accomplice, but I knew this. He had a son who loved him, who risked everything to protect me, and he was willing to betray that. I said I hoped he figured out who he wanted to be, because right now, I didn't recognize him. Daniel finally looked up. Tears were streaming down his face. His voice broke. He said he was so sorry, that he didn't know how to stop her, that he didn't know how to... Rachel grabbed his arm. She said they were leaving, now. She dragged him out. Mr. Voss was already gone. The door slammed, and the house was silent again, except for one sound. Small footsteps on the stairs, slow, hesitant. Benji came downstairs. His face was red. He'd been crying. He walked over to me, and he wrapped his arms around my waist. His voice was muffled against my chest. He said he was sorry, that he was sorry his daddy tried to hurt me. I held him, and I realized something. The smallest person in that room had been the bravest. If you're learning something here, if this story is showing you that age doesn't mean helpless, hit subscribe. I've got more stories coming. Stories about people who refuse to be victims. Stories about quiet strength winning over loud threats. Because the world needs to know we're not done yet. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the bank. The fraud investigation was opened within hours. Rachel's attempt to access the honeypot account was documented. Daniel's unauthorized login attempts were documented. Mr. Voss was reported to the state bar for participating in a coercive property transfer. I didn't press criminal charges, not yet, because I still had hope. Hope that my son could be saved. Daniel called me 6 weeks later. He said Rachel had filed for divorce. He said she'd been hiding $200,000 in credit card debt. He said he didn't know how to fix what he'd broken, and he asked if I'd ever forgive him. I told him I already had, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. I told him he needed to complete financial counseling. He needed to work with a therapist. He needed to understand how he let someone manipulate him into betraying his own father. And if he did those things, if he put in the work, then maybe he could be part of Benji's life again, part of my life again, but not until he became someone we could trust. Today, Benji visits me every weekend. Daniel is 6 months into counseling.
He's making progress. Slow progress, but progress. Rachel moved to another state. We haven't heard from her since. The house is still mine. The garden still blooms. And every time I walk through that front door, I think about the night my grandson saved us both.
Legacy isn't money. Legacy isn't property. Legacy is the values you pass down. My son chose greed that night. My grandson chose courage. And that 8-year-old boy reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one that saves everyone. I spent 35 years protecting strangers from financial predators, but I almost didn't protect myself because I didn't want to believe my own son could do it. If you're watching this and you have aging parents, visit them. Not to ask about money, not to talk about inheritance, just visit them. Because the people who wait for you to die are the same people who never really knew you. And if you're in a situation like mine, if someone you love is trying to take advantage of you, don't wait. Don't hope it'll get better. Protect yourself. Protect your legacy. And remember, strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper, a child's whisper, in the middle of the night saying, "Grandpa, I won't let them hurt you." Thank you for listening to my story. I know it wasn't easy to hear, but I needed to tell it because too many families are going through this in silence. Too many elders are being taken advantage of by the people they raised. And too many children, like Benji, are watching it happen, terrified, and don't know what to do. If this story meant something to you, if you've been through something similar, share your story in the comments. Let's talk about it. Because silence protects the predators, and speaking up protects the family. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about betrayal, justice, and the quiet strength it takes to survive, subscribe. Because I've got more to say, and I'm not done yet. Take care of each other. And remember, the people who love you don't wait for you to die. They show up while you're still here.